Thank you so much for joining me here today. Narcissists are not the only groups that cause narcissistic abuse. There are other personality styles that have been shown to cause problems for their partners and families and neighbors and coworkers. And this is the antisocial personality disorder. So today I would like to dig into that, to take a closer look at what is an antisocial personality disorder. What do we mean when we use the word psychopath and sociopath? Are they the same thing? Are they different? How do you know that you've met a psychopath versus a narcissist? What is all of this? Because we tend to get confused about them. And in fact, there's often thoughts that they're one and the same, and they're not. They're different types of groups. So let's stop for a moment and define this. Narcissistic abuse is perpetrated by a deception that substitutes the victim's reality for the perpetrator's reality. And the perpetrator does this for manipulation and exploitation. They have an ulterior motive that they want to keep the victim in the dark. A fantastic definition of narcissistic abuse was written in Psych Central by Dr. Kristen Milstead. She outlines 4 different points. And I don't want to review it because I have covered it before, but if you want to remind yourself what is the definition of narcissistic abuse, I think it is the best working definition that I have personally found. And again, you can find it in Psych Central. If you put in what is narcissistic abuse, Psych Central, and Dr. Milstead, you'll come up with a definition. But we often associate narcissistic abuse with narcissist, and it makes sense because the titles are the same. In a narcissistic abuse, you end up thinking then just narcissist, create the abuse of narcissistic abuse. That actually isn't true. Narcissistic abuse is just an umbrella, and it's any form of deception, manipulation for this sense of exploitation of the victim. It doesn't just necessarily is excluded to narcissists. There are other categories, and the other big group is the antisocial personality disorder. So what is that? When we say that, what is that? Because a lot of times they're a blend of both. You have people who have narcissistic tendencies or traits, and you also have people who have antisocial or psychopathic tendencies and traits. So let's pause for a moment and separate them in 2 categories, because there is a big group of overlap, and I want to make sure we separate them. Oh, and I just saw someone finished my book, Love You More. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'd love to hear what you think about it. And yeah, I was in a relationship with a narcissistic sociopath, somebody who fits in the center. Interestingly enough, my childhood, I was raised around several psychopaths. So I actually have personal, I wish I didn't, experience with psychopaths. They're a scary group. They're a very freaky group. So what are they? Psychopaths are people who, they've been described by psychodynamic theorists as having an empty core, that their self essentially is rather barren. It's devoid of a lot of what makes up you and me. Whereas a narcissist's core is fragile, it's very brittle, it's easily wounded and very weak. But a sociopath's core tends to be rather empty, barren, just devoid. And part of this is neurologically based. They actually are considered neurodivergent people because their neuroimaging looks different than the neuroimaging of the average population. One of the things they have a hard time with is they have a hard time identifying facial expressions of people. They've done tests where they have images up of people's faces, and you're supposed to tell, are they in a good mood or in a positive or bad mood? And they're very subtle. Some of them are micro expressions, and then there are others that are more obvious. Interestingly, those who score high on psychopathy tend to have a hard time identifying the facial expressions and knowing the difference between a bad facial expression and a positive facial expression. It takes a large facial expression, a large reaction on the face for them to be able to see the differences, which is really interesting. If you think about being blind, relatively blind to identifying the emotional states of others, then it would make sense why then you're not particularly concerned about the emotional states of others, because you literally can't see it. Then it ceases to be something that you're interacting with or that that's something that is meaningful to you. That I find that very intriguing. But the areas of the brain that have to do with fight or flight, alarm, our sense of risk and fear is underactive. It's actually a very quiet part of their brain, where for you and I, if we're faced something very scary, we feel a lot of fear. That part really lights up. It's very active. So they don't get alarmed. They're not upset easily by the same things that upset us. Let me kind of review all the criteria of them. I know that I'm not going to be able to tell you with the DSM-5. I won't be able to kind of say, okay, look for these things. They need to have so many of the. I'm not going to be able to do that, but I can at least review majority of the characteristics according to DSM-5. There is a callous ruthlessness towards others, a lack of empathy. They have a sense that they're superior to other people. This is different than entitled. Narcissists want to be superior to other people. They do believe they're unique and should deserve special treatment, but narcissists, though, aren't for sure. There's an edginess or kind of an insecurity, whereas somebody with more psychopathic tendencies doesn't feel an insecurity about that. They just know they're superior. The rules do not apply to them. Aren't concerned about that. They would be defined as conscienceless, so the things that would concern you and I about social mores and being appropriate are things that they aren't concerned with at all. That the fact that they are outside those lines don't disturb them and don't bother them. They're very exploitive. They have no problem being ruthless around the rules. They break the law frequently, maybe subtly, maybe not enough to get caught, but they have no qualms to doing what they need to do to get ahead. And they also are equally ruthless around the truth. They have no qualms to telling you whatever they think you need to hear in order to advance with their cause. Now, how does this differ? Because that means they're promiscuous, they're law-breaking, they're lying, they're deceiving, they're betraying, they're doing a lot of the similar things to narcissists. So how do then they differ from narcissists? Well, narcissist core is shame-based. So there's this increased activity or energy around avoidance of shame. It's not that they may present somewhat similarly, but there's not the same kind of callousness, overt, ruthless, blunt, like, I don't care, nothing matters to me, it literally doesn't affect me. It's more brittle, it's more fragile than that. And I know that makes it hard to tell the difference because we're talking about very subtle things, almost abstract differences that make it really, really hard to differentiate the difference between the two of them. I would say this: if you're in a relationship with somebody where you know they have moments of remorse, maybe briefly, and then it disappears, it's fleeting. They have moments of emotional expression where they seem authentically connected with themselves, but although fleeting, that they do have kind of this insecurity around themselves. You're probably seeing more of a narcissistic tendency than you're actually seeing a psychopathic tendency. Psychopaths don't ask themselves those things. They aren't concerned about those things. They really don't care what you think of them. There's absolutely devoid concern about their impact on others. It is only this methodical, kind of almost cold relationship they have with the world because they're not able to have intimate connections with other people. I would say that's the big difference. Whereas narcissists tend to be very concerned about admiration and need it, a psychopath wouldn't. They wouldn't care if you admire them. That's beside the point. Why would they get caught up in the minutia of that? So that would be kind of the big ways of separating them. A really good author, if you want to read more about this, somebody who's devoted his life studying this, is Robert Hare, Dr. Robert Hare. He wrote the book Without Conscience. He also has another book called Snakes in Suits. I love that title. I think that's a great title. So I don't know if he's still living anymore because these books are kind of the turn of the century, 20th, first centuries when he was writing these. But I think that those are very pivotal books and they do a nice job kind of defining all of this. So let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy, and I haven't been able to watch your comments because I had my glasses off, which kind of is good, helps me to think so I don't get so caught up with what people are saying. But I'm Dr. Kerry McAvoy. I am a clinical psychologist. I have over 20 years of counseling experience. I love hanging out with you guys on TikTok and Instagram. I'm both live on both of them. Oh yeah, Jackson McKenzie. I would love, if anyone knows Jackson McKenzie, because right now I have a lot of people in TikTok. I would love to have, if you can put me into contact with him, I'd love to interview him. That would be really, really wonderful. And thank you so much for liking and following me. If you don't follow me over on Instagram, make sure you do, because I do post independent stuff that I don't post on TikTok. And Instagram, if you're not following me over on TikTok, please do, because I post the most recent videos always go live on TikTok first. I have a YouTube channel, and by the way, I'm so excited. I just did a blind reaction to Kaylin and Jason's labor and delivery on TLC's Unexpected. So many of you happened to see the YouTube video where I did a blind reaction when they talked about being pregnant and having this baby and do they have home birth or go to the hospital. I went ahead and I watched both clips of the labor and then the clip of the delivery. And oh man, just wait till you see what I think. I had a whole lot to say about that episode. So if you want to be able to check that out, make sure you, I don't know when it will go live, probably in the next week over on YouTube. So I have a YouTube channel though. Some rules to the room. So for those of you who are new to me, thank you so much for liking and following me. That's great. I have a hard time because comments, I can't tell when you're just talking to each other or making a comment or when you're actually asking me a question, and I do take questions. Please put your thumbs up ahead of the comment. That lets me know you're talking to me. And then, and I have subscription live. So if you are a person who's subscribed to my lives on TikTok, your questions and comments come right to the first of the line. It's like you're passed to the front. So thank you so much for subscribing over there. But put your thumbs up ahead so I know that you're talking to me, and then I will take your questions. And please know, I have 350 people in the room. It's very hard for me to see all the activity that comes through. So if I miss your comment and it's really important, please make sure you put another thumbs up and ask it again so that I can see it and I'll ask. Okay, wow, that popped up a whole bunch in. I moved states away because of my abuser. This is what Virgo has to say. I moved states away because of abusive relationship. And I have a feeling is that it's not going well and you haven't gotten away from this person, is my suspicion. I'm glad you moved away, and we often have to do that because they continue to stalk us. And I know that's a very bothersome, like, why? Why do people stalk us? You know, you'd think that once the relationship's over, it would be out of sight, out of mind, but it's not. Now, if you were in a relationship with a psychopath, sociopath, you probably would be out of sight, out of mind, except if they had a grudge with you and they really felt that that you severely hurt them in some way and they needed to even the score. They keep long records of what you've done and not done, and they would then make sure that they swing back to hold you accountable for that. Otherwise, for a psychopath, sociopath, you probably, once the relationship's over, because they're consumers only, they don't have relationships, they don't really care how you do, they never cared about you in the beginning, they would move on, move away, unless, for example, that they continue to have fun hurting you. It might be for their pleasure, they would continue to stalk you. But narcissists are different. Narcissists, they continue to have relationships with us even after the relationship's over, because in their minds they continue to own you. You're never fully, you're part of their collection. That's the best way that I can see it, is that you're part of their collection, and they periodically want to visit that collection, kind of reminisce about it, maybe see if they can even take you for another spin, see what they can do. It's very odd how they do that. So it's very, very hard to get away from a narcissist, because mentally you never get away from them. They're always a part of the mental landscape. What advice? Okay, there's other questions ahead of that. I was with a narcissist for 13 years and it's tough, but 6 years ago broke free. That is awesome. I'm so glad for that. Does a narcissist guy get diagnosed? How does it get diagnosed if they're so good at acting fine, especially with tricking counselors? Yeah, that's an interesting question. Therapists, now I'm not speaking for every therapist. I really am not. I'm talking about therapists who've been trained heavily in personality disorders, and so they understand the nuanced way and how to use themselves in the room with different personality disorders, how personality disorders make them feel. They're really trained at a high level of sophistication. It's pretty clear. How you know is the response around comments and questions. whether or not there's a need for admiration and a mirroring going on. You can feel, it's hard to describe, but if you spend enough time with someone and you keep hearing the way that they frame things, you begin to get the sense of their worldview, and that worldview then tells you how they see themselves in the world, how they see other people around them, how they're using you. For example, they will act entitled around the appointments or around the payments. They'll do funny things with payments. They may withhold it, forget to pay you. They may fuss around the cost and make jabs at you about how much it costs to see you. You'll get all of this, and all of that information tells you a lot about a person. So if you're paying attention to that, you can begin to get a sense this is a more narcissistic process. But I hate to tell you, not everybody who sees clients are reading that or are able to do that. But so it's really important for you to interview people before you see them as a therapist, that you have a sense of how much experience do they have, and are they aware of even what narcissistic abuse is? Do they know what that is? And have they had much experience? Have they had extra training? You know, one of the things I continue to do is take a lot of continuing education with what I consider people to be the experts in this. I've just finished, 30 plus hours of training specifically on narcissistic abuse this year. So yeah, you would want to watch for somebody who's having that clinical experience, but it's tough. Not everybody, I would say, is equally good at these things. Thank you so much. I just saw someone subscribe for the live, and I'm so excited. It was somebody with the name Leonard. Thank you for that. And already there's so many questions flying through. I know I'm not going to see your question. So if I don't answer in general around somebody else's questions, because a lot of you have similar questions, please make sure that I see it, because I want to make sure I hit all of these topics. And I do have to break off at 2:00 today, my time, Central Time. So I will be here for another 45 minutes. And thank you so much. I'm overwhelmed by the number of people here who are here with me. I appreciate that. That means a lot to me. Is personality disorders nature, nurture, a combination of both? We know that 80% of it is attributed to genetics because of twin studies. There's an 80% concordance rate. Actually, they fluctuate between upper 60s to 80%. And interestingly enough, psychopaths are 80% genetic pass it on. It's called concordance rates. So how often does it occur between twins? How often does it occur between family members? Well, majority of it is attributed to the 80% of it is attributed to genetics. But there's that 20% that's not. What is that related to? Well, it's an interaction with environment and the genetics. There's this biosocial connection that causes, that activates that, or maybe help kind of cement that. We also know, and here's the thing that we often not spend enough time focusing on, is that what happens in your life, in your early childhood years, actually shapes your brain, and it continues to, but to a lesser degree. But those first 20 some years of your life is very pivotal, because you're laying down foundational skills that you're building in. I mean, when you're born, your ability to see, by the way, is only 8 inches. You have no sense of what sound you're hearing. You're learning language super rapidly. You're learning so much. You come out with this incredible organic computer. In a way, it's an organic computer that is rapidly making sense of the world, and in turn rapidly making sense of themselves as a person in the relationship with the world. So it's this interconnection between your genetic makeup that makes you prone to have these personality deficits, combined with your social environment, your relationship with your caregivers, that causes all of this to sort of end up being a problem. And we know now that it is not. Here's a big piece, and I know this is a common myth that's perpetuated on social media. It is not because of adverse childhood. People are not narcissistic or sociopathic or codependent, or any other word you want to use necessarily. Well, codependency probably is, I'm thinking of people pleasing. That could be a survival mechanism from a dysfunctional or abusive home. But when it comes to narcissism and antisocial personality disorder, this is not related to adverse childhood. It is not related to trauma. They've actually looked at that. They've kind of controlled trauma as a variable to see what the connection is. They looked at both directions. They looked at everybody who's had a high ACE score. If you heard of ACE, ACE is a assessment that you can take that would rate how much trauma you had in your childhood. So they took everybody who has an ACE score and then said what percentage of them has personality disorders. They found out it wasn't there wasn't much correlation. Then they looked at the opposite direction. They looked at everybody who has a personality disorder and said, do they have traumatic childhoods? Again, they didn't have a whole lot. There wasn't a great correlation. So, which makes sense because you and I all know many people have had very traumatic childhoods and they're fine. They're functional. And yet we'll know if somebody else who has a personality disorder and you listen to their childhood and you're like, comparatively to the trauma that other people have had, this person has not had it that bad, then why are they so ill? So it's really not related to trauma or childhood. I know that it's a very common theory. It's appealing to people who have personality disorders because it's a great way for them to say, it's not my fault. I had it was my parents' fault. They do that to victims. You made me react. I hit you because you upset me. I mean, they love to sort of offload responsibility. So they like it because it gives them a reason to blame. Whereas if you say, well, you're born this way, I guess it gives them another reason to blame. But, if somebody was born without a limb or without an eye or an ear or hearing, you would find ways to compensate. In the same way, personality deficits, it's on them to find new ways to compensate in order to get along with and deal well with the world. How do you break a trauma bond? Somebody asked, how do you break the attachment that you have to a person who's pathologically narcissistic or sociopathic? And what is really even a trauma bond? It was fascinating. I don't know how many of you are aware that I had interviewed Dr. Kristen Milstead, Why Can't I Just Leave? That's the book she wrote, A Guide to Waking Up and Walking Out of Pathological Love Relationships. It's a fascinating book. If you guys haven't purchased it, I highly recommend. I think it is the best book out there that does this very nice synthesis of explanation of how the grooming happens, to the duality that you start to experience, which causes the cognitive dissonance. Who do you really are in a relationship with? Is it who you thought you met, or is it somebody else? And then the effect of living under this very threatening, unsafe environment and how it creates the trauma bond. It is the best book that I know that synthesizes all of that. And I did a live webinar with her on August 18th, and the replays are now available for purchase through the link in my bio. So if you think that would be beneficial, it was a fantastic interview. She gave the 5 stages of love bombing. She talked a lot. I mean, she's a researcher, so she came at it from the angle of a sociologist, researcher who also is narcissistically abused and understands the things that you and I need to get closure. She really approached the book from that angle and approached the webinar. So if you're interested, please check the link in my bio. So what is a trauma bond? And this is something she made a point of. A trauma bond is something that happens when you go through an extraordinarily unique situation that is highly scary and intense, confusing. It's a relationship that you build with the people who go through it with you. So if you survived a catastrophic childhood, you probably have a trauma bond with your siblings if they went through it with you. If you've been in the military and you went through, say you saw action with a squad, you probably have a trauma bond with those brothers and sisters that you served with. You feel they've become very significant to you. If, God forbid, if you were in a hostage situation and you were with other people for a long period of time trying to survive this hostage situation, you would have a trauma bond with all those people in the room that you got to know. But interestingly enough, you also develop trauma bonds with abusers, especially when you live with them for periods of time and they increase your dependence on them. This happened, for example, for those of us who are old enough to remember, with Patty Hearst. She began to live with these people who then would scare her, threaten to kill her, and then turn around and give her seemingly kind things, like be concerned if she was cold at night, or gave her a glass of water, or took care of her needs. When they do this odd blend of withholding, punishment, fear, combined it with acts of kindness and sometimes seeing you, it ends up creating this connection that you have, that you become grateful for the kindness. You become highly dependent on them for your basic needs, even though they're the ones that are depriving you of your rights. You become dependent on them. And yes, it's known also as Stockholm Syndrome. This is also referred to as brainwashing. It is also referred to as cult programming. So it's used in a variety of situations. The military does it. It wants you to have this very tight connection with your squad. It wants you to really trust those that are in charge of you and supervision over you. So it does this purposefully. It breaks you down and reconnects you with people, puts you through an extraordinarily difficult situation in order you have this bond, this connection. That's a trauma bond. Yeah, or a betrayal bond. That's Patrick Carnes talks about in his book called Betrayal Bonds. It is manipulative and for control, but for sometimes you think of the military, do I want the squad operating in one mind? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, because that then makes them more likely to protect our country better. I'm thankful that that technique is used that way. Now, when I hear people about, for example, I was old enough to know Jim Jones. For those of you, I don't know if you know about Jim Jones, he was a cult leader. In fact, actually, he had connections with people that I knew back in Michigan, and he had, I don't remember where it was someplace south. And he had a group of people where he felt like it's a threat, and he got them all to drink poison-laced Kool-Aid and killed themselves before people came in to discover it. Why would a whole group of people, reasonable people, business people, uproot their lives, move down to live on this compound, and then why would they knowingly drink a poison? Why would they do that? Or Waco in Texas is another great example with David Koresh. Why do people do that? Reasonable people do that. I was following the situation with I know I'm going to say it wrong. It was on a HBO series, and it had the actress that played on Smallville, and I love her. I love that character. She got all wrapped up into it and ended up even getting other people to get into this Nexus or something like that, NX or something like that. She got people wrapped up to follow that, to do it, and now she's been charged, and I think she's been found to be guilty, charged with a criminal offense for participating in all of that. And so it is frightening how cult programming really, really works and how it can get us to do reasonable things. Here's a question, because a lot of us get very negative on victims. If you read my book, it's interesting, my reviews levels are now fallen to 4.1 because I get periodically negative reviews. Why do I get negative reviews on a book that everybody, if you read the reviews, are 5 stars? It's one of the best books they ever read. Thank you. I'm not that grandiose to think it's the best book ever written, but it is. I think it's a well-written book. It's a powerful story. So why do people have issues with my story? Well, it's because they don't understand what a trauma bond is, and they think I sound very pathetic. In fact, one person said in a review, she sure hopes I've waken up and know how to set boundaries better. So what happens to victims that make them so compelled, so stuck in the relationship that they end up not being able to save themselves? And Dark Curl, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad I have a subscriber here. Name of my book's called Love You More, The Harrowing Tale of Lies, Sex Addiction, and Double Cross. So what people don't understand in my book is that I am paralyzed by a trauma bond. I am totally immobilized to the point that I can't protect myself or make moves. It is, and I really want the way out. The solution I want is for my ex to get better, for him to stop abusing me, and then that would solve all the problems. I keep hoping, because he's isolated me so severely that I'm financially in trouble. He's wound me up financially. I have no hardly any outside friends. I'm not even in the same country, that I don't know the language well, so I can't navigate the country. I have no home back in my home country, United States. So I'm literally paralyzed in this place of dependency, to where my best solution is if he would just become healthier, more well-functioning, and stop hurting me, then all of this would go away. And that's what people don't understand, is that these trauma bonds cause you to do things that you normally wouldn't do. But you know what? We all do, because these forms of manipulation is used all around us. You're being constantly bombarded by these forms of manipulation. It's happening to you right now. You turn on a TV and you watch an ad, you just were attempted to be manipulated. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever done or bought something that you didn't mean or didn't really intend to do? Did you walk into a store or end up ordering something off of a show because you thought, hey, that looks really good, and you wonder later, why did you do that? Or isn't all that you thought it was? How many times have you gotten on Instagram and saw a fantastic product before you know it's in your cart and you're buying it? That is the effect of what we're talking about. But imagine that, the power of that, the effectiveness of ads, the effectiveness of the salesman, and put that into a context of now you're isolated. You've now maybe gotten married, maybe you have kids together, maybe you've bought something together, maybe you also you don't have a connection to the world around you. You do all of that, and no wonder people can't get out. No wonder it's extremely, extremely hard to get out. Somebody was talking very loud, positive, lovable. Just want to let you know that you're an amazing. Oh, thank you so much. You needed to scream that at me. I appreciate that. So how do you? I mean, Brittany asked me, and if there's a question come in that's from one of my subscribers, please ask it again so I don't miss it. But Brittany just asked me, so how do you heal if you've been in one of these situations where your nervous system is now all dysregulated because you've been in a trauma bond, because you've been in a scary situation, you're frightening? Then what do you do to re-regulate yourself? I can tell you ways to recognize that your system, your nervous system is still highly aroused or in the throes of it. Ask yourself these questions. How's your sleep? Are you getting enough sleep? Can you stay asleep? I know for me that I started sleeping less. I needed less sleep. How is your relationship with food going? How is your weight? How is your overall health? How's your blood pressure? Your sugar levels? All these. Do you have pain in the joint? Do you have signs of inflammatory disease of some kind? Because chronic stress will cause heightened level of cortisol, which then causes chronic inflammation in the body. It's very damaging to the body. So you have all of these reactions that happen when you're under chronic stress. And unfortunately, narcissistic abusive relationships cause chronic stress. So the way to begin to detox, and it takes time, it takes a lot of time. You won't see this as immediate results. So you're going to have to view this like, literally, I've used this analogy before and I really like it, from a couch to a marathon. You've been sitting on the couch, you can't even walk fast, but you want to run a marathon and you want to time that marathon. You have to view it like that. And you're not going to see a whole lot of gains in the beginning. It's going to be very, very, very slow. But I would begin to get very rigid around starting to get some exercise, regular plan of exercise, get out, get into nature, make sure you're drinking water, make sure you're having a healthy diet, a well-rounded diet, get in and see your doctor, make sure you're taking good dental care. All of these basic things that we know better that probably chances are when you're in the throes of that relationship, I bet you'll let a lot of it drop because you were all about so much of trying to make sure this uneasy to please person was pleased. So you threw yourself into sort of saving, rescuing, being present for this very difficult person. And as a result, you got ignored, your needs. And here's the other subtle thing that happens that I feel sick about, but I see it in my life, is that their chronic neglect of you and abuse of you, you then internalize and you start to neglect yourself. You become accidentally your own neglect, you self-neglect. So you have to relearn how to begin to see yourself and treat yourself and protect yourself and put these things at the forefront. But it takes a long time. I rigidly set 8 hours aside for myself. And when I get up at night, I force myself not to look at the phone because the light from the phone it's so bright, it's too bright, and it will disrupt the hormone levels that you need in your body to stay sleepy. That's why once you look at your phone, you start to wake up and get going. The light is activating and making your mind think that the sun has come up and it wakes you up. So don't look at the phone. I know I shouldn't have in my bedroom. That would even be better, but I still do. But that's one thing to do. I got into the habit of not eating regularly, but now I've been really watching my macros and making sure I get enough protein and really watching all of those levels. I'm getting rigid around those things, and it's helping. It's really helping, but it's a slow process. Another thing that really helps a lot is getting into good social support systems. You have to rebuild the ones that you lost. Get involved with groups who understand what you're going through. Yes, it helps me to have you join my premium private group. Of course, I get paid for it, but here's another big reason I have it is because when I was looking for groups, it was hard to find people who understood. How many of us talk to our friends and family and they don't get it, and they say invalidating statements that hurt us worse and we wish we'd never brought it up, which then isolates us, so we stop talking about it. Well, what's nice about narcissistic abuse survivor groups is that we know what you've gone through. We understand, and we know better than not to say those things to you, not to run you down, not to criticize you, not to make you feel ashamed or shit or bad or any of that, which is one of the reasons why I host Vibely, mine on Vibely. It's a small group where there's 2 tiers. So yes, I'm not saying mine's the only one. There are other people who have them too, but it's important to get involved with others who understand what you've been going through. So get support, take better care of yourself. And then I would really recommend that you get therapy of some kind that is a mind-body connective work. Mind-body, it needs to be both. It can't just be logic like cognitive behavioral therapy is great, but it is just the mind. It's not doing anything with the body. You need a mind-body connection. Now, maybe you can link them together. Maybe you can do that and also get into yoga. But there's things like yoga therapy, art therapy. There's also, there's EMDR. I saw another subscriber. Thank you so much, Burke County Poem, for that. I appreciate that. There are, so there's other things that you can do that are treatments that are both mind-body treatments that are very, very helpful. EMDR, I can't say enough about. I just think it is so helpful. What it does, it decouples the intense emotional dysregulation that you have around memories with the memories so that you are now not being controlled by your triggers. So it's really, really helpful. So do some type of work around a mind-body connection is very, very important. Great question. I know that a lot of people ask about that, and thank you for bringing that up so that I could spend some time on that. I unfortunately cannot go back to where we started because it's way, way back. So if your question so far has not been answered by me in Instagram, I'm watching you. I don't see a lot of questions over there. So I'm focusing mostly on over here on TikTok, but I'm trying to pay attention to you. Yeah. So I'm going way back to try to see if I can find comments before. And, oh, here's another really good one. Star asked this. Star 28 asked, how do we help those that we love see that they're in a verbal or emotionally abusive relationship? I get asked that all the time. I think that's one of the biggest things that people reach out to me for is for help, how to help a family member or a loved one. I want to give you some tough love around that. And somebody else is asking, what about my book? So I'll show you my book while I'm thinking of my answer here. Here's my book, Love You More, The Harrowing Tales of Lies, Sex Addiction, and Double Cross. You can buy it online anywhere that sells books. I also sell it to myself, the ebook directly at a discounted price. If you want to save a little bit off the listed retail price, see the link in my bio and buy it from me directly. If you don't care, you're getting a digital version. But the paperback and the hardcover is available Amazon. It's available anywhere that sells those types of books. So, but thank you for asking me. So how do we help loved ones who are in the throes of a relationship? Well, this is an uncomfortable truth. You cannot help somebody see something until they're ready to see it. Have you ever noticed somebody's talking to you about something really, really pivotal, and suddenly your brain fizzes, and you almost like you can't hear them? You know they're talking, you hear the words, you know there's sound around you, but you can't take it in. That what's happening is that you're not ready, and your unconscious is actually blocking you from hearing it. I see it often when I was doing counseling. People were like, I don't, they would just their mouth would go they would get a blank look on their face and like, I know you're saying something really important, but I can't take it in. That means I just said something that was out of time. I gave them an insight. They weren't ready. It may have been truthful, but they weren't ready to hear it. We only can hear what we're ready to hear. I know it happened to me. I write a book called The Passionate Marriage. I often reference it here on these lives by Dr. David Schnarf. When I first read it the first time, I couldn't read it. It was like reading another language. It didn't make sense to me. It wasn't until several years later that I picked it back up and I was ready to hear what it had to say that suddenly I could read it and it made sense to me. So those around you, you can scream, yell, beg, plead. You can even offer to pay them to see the truth. They will not see the truth until they're ready. And they'll resent you for all the effort that you're putting into it. They'll be mad because they'll feel like you're isolating them and making them make a choice, and they don't want to make a choice. So that means you've got to take time and be present. Learn how to really be present around someone that you know is in a situation that makes you personally uncomfortable. And for some of us, and this is part I don't understand, the part that I don't understand is why some of us make that a non-negotiable thing. Like, if you don't set limits with that guy, then I can't be in a relationship with you. Please. Why do we do that? I don't know why we do that, because now you've isolated them and you're probably one of the few people that they might eventually turn to, and now they don't have a relationship with you, and you're not going to be around when that moment comes and they're ready to hear. You won't be there to be able to give the feedback to them. The name of the book I just mentioned is called The Passionate Marriage. The Passionate Marriage by David Schnarf. Awesome book. It's about sex, by the way, how to have fantastic sex in an intimate relationship. So if you want, and David Schnarf, man, he's an amazing guy. He has one called Mind Mapping. I love his, he is a therapist. He's no longer alive. He passed away a couple years ago. He's a therapist that he would say things in a way that's like, ooh, brutal. I mean, like spot on truthful. So if you really want to kind of challenge yourself and look at yourself in a new way and look at how to have better intimacy, I highly recommend his work. He has another one called The Crucible, but The Passionate Marriage is the one I was referencing. So back to friendships and support, being family. Sit with this person, be a friend, zip your lip about the relationship. When they complain about the guy, but you can tell that they're not really ready to hear the truth, don't say more. Just say, oh, that sounds tough. Well, I'd have a tough time if that happened to me, So be present, be caring, but don't say, why are you still with him? I told you he was no good for you. Don't do that. All it does is it alienates them from you and they feel invalidated. There will come a point in the relationship where suddenly they start to wake up and they realize things are not good. And they will then begin to look for help around them and they will turn to you. But they will let you know when that's happening. And you will recognize, because there's a readiness and an openness that there wasn't before. And that's when you can say, I have been very concerned. I want to support you. I know this is a process and you're having a hard time, but I'm here. Let me know how I can help you. Let me know how I can help you. So that's what it looks like. But what does it mean for us who watch this and we can't intervene? And I know this because I watched my sister, who passed away in June, she was in several very abusive relationships. Each time she'd get into a new abusive relationship, it'd break my heart. In fact, one of them, it wasn't the last one. It was the second one. She took there's a test you guys can take. I bet you didn't know. It's called Prepare. PREPARE it's an acronym for the name of the test. It's a premarital assessment of what kind of relationship you're going to have with your partner. It kind of identifies main areas that you typically face, like how you handle chores, what are your families about, are you traditional marriage or non, how do you deal with about money, all those big things. And it looks at your combined answers collectively, and it has over a 90% accuracy rate to predict whether or not you're going to have a good relationship or not. Yeah, it's pretty intimidating. So she and her partner took it, and then her partner refused to sit and hear the results. Now, I didn't feel it was fair for me to go back and tell her the results when I can't tell him the results. What do you do with that? So I wouldn't tell her the results. I said, I'm sorry. I have to sit with both of you, and you have to, for me to tell you. You can't take it alone. It has to be administered to you by a psychologist or a trained clinician. So you guys can't have access to it, but you can go into the site and find out who gives this assessment. And there's also one for blended families and one for new people who've never been married before. They have a variety of them. So years later, as the marriage is breaking up with this guy, it's called Prepare, Prepare, Prepare. I will put a link in my link bio so you guys can find it. So wait, when I get done with this, I'll immediately go to my link tree and put it in so you guys can find it. It's a great assessment. I've taken it myself before my last marriage. Interestingly enough, the guy lied. So if you have someone who's really good at narcissism and who's sociopathic, that's who I got in a relationship with. They can like, but I saw some of the lie inventory questions spiked, but because that's the problem with me being my own interpreter. I didn't listen to what this test told me. I didn't say, oh, we should throw this test out. It's not accurate. It said it wasn't an accurate result. I ignored that. So the failure of it wasn't on the test. The failure of it was on me. Yeah. So, but back to the story. My sister then came back as the years were over, or the relationship was breaking up and coming to an end. She said, all I said to her in the early part, because I wouldn't tell her the results, I said, it's warning that this is going to be a difficult relationship. That's what I told her. It's warning this is going to be a difficult relationship. The relationship is breaking up and she's getting divorced. She came back crying and she said, I told you, or you told me it would be a difficult relationship, but I didn't know that you meant it would be that bad. And I said, what do you think difficult means? She goes, I know, but I didn't think you meant that bad. Yeah, I said, yeah, I meant that bad. I said, but I couldn't say because the two of you wouldn't sit for the exam or the test results. It wasn't fair to give you them. What would you do with it? You two needed to do it together. He wouldn't do it with you. I wasn't going to do that. It just was, to me, unethical. I wasn't going to do that. So yeah, it's a great way, but there will come a point when your partner, your friend or family member will have this point. Now, maybe it may be years. It may be years. You may have to, with my sister, it wasn't till just recently, just as she was getting ill, that she realized that this last relationship was as ill as every other relationship she was in. And unfortunately, she'd never done the work between their relationships, so she wasn't healthy, and she kept repeating this, getting in the same very devastating type of relationships. And ultimately, the accumulation of all of it, I am determined, killed her. I really believe that it led to a direct running down of her to such severity that it took her life, that it destroyed her. And I know how many of us who've been any kind of length of time have seen your health deteriorate. I tell you at the end of the book that I had suspicions that I was being actually injured physically, secretively, physically being injured in my relationship. But I also know the stress was causing all sorts of havoc on my body, all sorts of havoc, weight fluctuations, sleep problems, just racing heart, racing mind, all of this was really playing lots of chaos and havoc on me. I now have enough subscribers, guys. For those of you who are subscribers on TikTok, I'm going to post and publish a live for you. So watch for this being advertised so you all can come and ask my questions. I'll let other people ask questions, but it will be specifically focused on you. So I think I now have maybe 15 people or upwards to there. So watch for that. And I will make sure that I'll advertise it really soon so that we can do something special to highlight as my big thank you to you. And I will do this on a regular basis, dedicate lives to you as my thank you, as a perk of subscribing here. So thank you so much for that. Other questions right now that are coming up. Yeah, I saw Dark Cow. I do really think that it does contribute. Thank you so much, Rose Quartz, for subscribing. I appreciate that. I do think it does detrimentally affect our health. I think this is the part that I get really angry about. I'm going to get on one of my soapboxes here. Do you think abuse is a new thing? Do you think we have historically, we've seen all forms of abuse throughout history, from forms of slavery to subjugation of one group by another it is not, and I agree with you, it is not anything new. That's my point. It is not anything new. All right, if it's not new, why is there so little research on what helps victims, on what it does to victims, on the consequences to victims? Why is not anyone caring about that? I have my theory. My theory is because those that are abusers, the oppressors, are often have the access to the money, they have access to political power, they get to define what the agendas are, and as a result, why would they want anything to change? If we become more informed and more aware of the massive detrimental effects this has on a person, then they'd have to do something about it, right? Then there would be a request for accountability. Well, why would they want to give up any of that? Because that then means they give up their special privileges of treating one group poorly by another group. And it has taken many nasty forms throughout history. Many nasty forms. This is just one of many. I think we don't know because they don't want to know, because they don't want to be held accountable. Because if they found out how many lives we're killing and destroying from this, then there would be an outrage and there would be a call for things to be different. And the powers that be don't want it to be different. They don't want it to be different. That's what I love about this. What I love what's happening on social media, because what's happening here is that we get to have a forum and we get to say this is inappropriate and needs to stop. And there's this and in fact, I'm hearing that it is having effects. There's some movement and changes happening, like, for example, in the legal court systems and how we see divorces and how all of that happens. So there is some movement, but we have a long ways to go. And I think that's one of the reasons why there is a massive level of rage right now going on between men and women. And I also know it's going on between races, is because we're recognizing things have to stop. We have to begin to treat everyone better. We have to. We have to give fair rights to all people of all things, equal access to all things, treat each other better. And narcissistic abuse is just one of the many ways that we abuse each other. Many, many, many ways. Yeah, so Cassiopeia asked, what about those who stay for the marriage because of the kids? And it's a common reason why we do that. We think that somehow we're helping kids when we do that. We are not. We're not. Now, children never win. If you stay, they don't win. If you leave, they don't win. But there's one caveat with leaving. The leaving part, at least for a period of time, when they're with you, they have a chance to see you get healthy. You treat yourself with self-respect. You begin to develop healthier, mature relationship with other people. And that is a big bonus. Whereas if you stay, they don't ever get to witness that. And meanwhile, they're coping with it 100% of the time. Because not only is it not safe for you, don't think that the kids don't know. The kids know, trust me, they know. And they are in it 100% of the time, having to navigate this tricky landscape. But at least when you leave, now they get the quiet and peace with you when they're with you, even if it was a 50-50 split, which God forbid, I hope it doesn't end up that way, although I know it lots. A lot of narcissistic partners, once the kids are not in their life and they're not around them, the kids are just an object too, a tool, or, it's just an object. They often out of sight, out of mind, and they don't take they kind of disappear, except they'll jerk it around in order to hurt you. That part never stops. They love to make life difficult for you, but their impact, their involvement with the kid lessens just because they're just not interested in people. They don't, not even on their own children. They do a lot of talk about it, kids, but they don't really show up. They don't know how to show up. Yes, I know the courts are biased on that. The courts really are biased on wanting to try to keep families together and keep biological connections together. They will make that choice over everything else. And I understand that. As a psychologist, I would get involved. That's where I got involved legally most often, was around custody cases. I had a few times I had to testify, and there were frequently I wouldn't agree, but man, they are definitely, at least they were back in the day. I don't know if it's still that way, but it was that way. I'm trying to see what time it is. in 7 minutes, I'm heading over to YouTube to talk or to watch Tuesdays live. So if you want to watch it with me, I chat through it. So I'm there talking to you all. So I literally am live, but I'm not, it's not a live, it's a replay, but it's live of me. I'm there and we talk about stuff. So you want to head over there with me, I'd be happy to do that. And I'm glad you guys found my page today too. I really, really appreciate all of this and love how many of you subscribed and that, that we've been able to talk about these topics. Oh, here's a question that I saw Skier Girl ask, and Skier Girl, I did see it, and I'm going to circle back. How do we identify the red flags early on? That is tricky. Very, very tricky. It's hard to see them in the beginning because a couple reasons. We all are putting our best foot forward. So you're not ever meeting really the full real person. My YouTube channel is, I think the link is in this TikTok. If you go up where it says Instagram, it puts Instagram and YouTube. I'm pretty sure that's there. But if you put Kerry McAvoy PhD, you'll pop me up. It's easy to find me over there. So it's the same name. But yeah, we're always putting our best foot forward when we meet somebody because it's all about making the sale. Dating's about making the sale. The good news is most of us move over into making a committed relationship. We find a way. We know how to do that. We know how to build a relationship as we start to do that. Yeah, that's a good suggestion to put the books I'm mentioning today in the bio. Yeah, I will go ahead and I have a link in there already called resources that I recommend, mental health resources. It's in there. And I will make sure all the books I mentioned today are in that link tree. You know what? One of my own mental health resources, I didn't put my own book in there. I need to go do that. So thank you for the reminder of that. But yes, it's mental health resources. It's the label. And all the books that I like are in there. Yeah. So how do we recognize red flags? Well, we need to get better at recognizing narcissists. That's one thing that helps, is to identify the grandiosity, the way that it manifests when they're trying to be their best self. The way that if you feel like it's too good to be true, I would be very worried about that. And take your time. I would also make sure I see people under multiple situations with other people, different people, with a variety of situations with different people. So what are they like around family? What are they like around your friends? What are they like around their friends? What are they like around their coworkers? How are they if under a tense situation? You know, what happens when they get a near miss on the road? Do they have road rage? I mean, notice all these ways that people kind of manifest or show up, because chances are they're not going to be able to hold the self that they've created for you up continuously through all these different situations. It's very hard to do that. So take time, see them in a variety of situations, get to meet their family, find out what that family relationship looks like. How healthy is it? How connected are they? Do they have a good connection with their kids if there are children? How do they talk about past exes? What's that relationship like? Here's another one I would really watch. Watch how they treat their phone. Do they kind of act like it's something exclusive to them and it's proprietary and they act really touchy around it? If you see that kind of this edginess, oh, thank you so much, Ben. And if you guys don't follow Raw Motivation is a self-aware narcissist who does a lot of education on narcissistic abuse, but also how the mind of a narcissist. He really takes you inside of that. He also has a NARC app where you can learn more about narcissistic abuse and narcissism, like trauma bond and cognitive dissonance and boundaries and all of that stuff. So, check out Raw Motivations, an amazing account. Dear friend of mine, I appreciate him so much. So yeah, really watch them under multiple situations. And somebody already mentioned this, and I cannot say it enough. Trust your gut. Learn to really focus in on how even what your gut says. Do you even know when it's talking to you and what it means when it says something? It's not your natural instinct. Instinct is the way you're hardwired. So if you're an introvert and you never want to go out in the evenings and somebody suggests you do it and you're like, I don't really, that's not your gut. That's your instincts. Your gut is, you want to, but something's telling you that it's not, something's off, not adding up. It just feels odd. Maybe you even feel a little scared or edgy. And you can't tell yourself why. You don't know why, because your gut doesn't have words. It just has the feelings. That's your second brain system. It's called the enteric nervous system. It's actually literally a part of your nervous system. Your gut system is tapped in and wired into your brain. That's why when you get really scared, your gut reacts. It's why sometimes some disorders, digestive disorders, is actually due to psychological problems. They're very connected to each other. They inform each other. They're related to each other. So learn to pay attention to that. If something feels off or makes you feel uncomfortable, if you get a second sense about something, learn to really lean into that. I had one of the blessings I got out of this last relationship is a lot of the gut reactions I had, I got to check out and find out whether or not my gut was right or wrong, because I didn't believe it. Frankly, if you grow up in a home that's dysfunctional, parents often teach you to ignore your gut. And society does that too, kind of poo-poos it, like he kind of bothered me. You're making way too much of it. No, we need to pay attention to that. But here's one of the, for instances, that I talk about in the book, and I also talk about before. But we were dating. I think it was the second date. I was in his car, and a phone call came in, and he took it on the Bluetooth. So he talked to this person out loud in front of me. Now I'm looking back and I think, oh, that was odd. That's probably one of the things that, you don't do that. You would take the call privately, not publicly. It was a woman, and he and her were talking business. And as they were talking about business, my gut said to me, I actually heard the instinct, and I actually heard the interpretation. My gut said to me, they've had a relationship. Why would I think that? I mean, it's a business call. It's clear it's a business call. Where is that coming from? And I'm not normally a paranoid person. My first husband, the one that passed away from cancer, never even looked at a woman. That was not a dynamic. Suspiciousness, paranoia, fears of him cheating, just wasn't on my radar. I mean, never in a million years with my first husband. Just wasn't going to happen. He got off the phone and he said, yeah, she's helping me with getting new furniture for the office and doing us a really big favor. And, she used to be somebody I date, but she knows it's over and we don't see each other anymore. He offered me all of this. There's problem number 2. He offered way too much information. You didn't need explaining any of that to me. Why do that? By the way, that's often what people do when they're trying to cover for a lie or cover for something. They tell you too much. They overshare because in their minds, they have to give a justifiable excuse that makes sense. So they share more than they would, because normally if it was a no big deal, you would say nothing. But he's saying a lot. I find out later, and it took me a year and a half later, we're already married, way into the marriage. I found records that they had been actively having a relationship. Actively. They were still sleeping together while that phone call happened. A great book, and it is in the link in my mental health resources about this, it talks about this, is called The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. Gavin de Becker has a fabulous book. He has an incredible story. It had to do with him. It starts out in the beginning of the book. He tells about a 12-year-old boy with a 4-year-old sister, and his parents are fighting, and the voices are getting louder and louder. And something in this 12-year-old boy, which is himself, he's telling you about his own story, says, get his sister out of the room, get into another room. This is going to go really bad. So he does. He takes his sister away. And by the end of the night, his mom shoots his father, kills his father. How did he know that? How did he know that this argument was going to go different than every other argument they've ever had? But something inside him told him that this was going to go really bad and that he needed to get his little sister out of the room. So he spends the whole bulk of the book talking about why we don't listen to our gut, the things that we miss. He works with victims, not criminal victims of crimes, not domestic violence crime. Let me say it again. He works with victims of crimes, not domestic abuse crimes, but crimes like assaults, kidnappings, rapes, all sorts of stuff. He works with that group, and then he dissects what goes wrong. When did they pick up the cues that this was going to be bad? What did they miss? And he literally breaks it all down so that it's you and I can get better at recognizing signs of danger. That's the whole point of the book. He wants us to use our fear as a signal for danger and to know when we should listen to it and when we shouldn't. Great book. Really, really, really good book. So it's after 2. I do need to get going. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. I'm always here on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Usually I'm here at 12:30. Today I had problems. Something came up in my own life that pushed me back by a half an hour. But I'm usually here at 12:30 Central Time. We have so much to talk about, Millie. I agree. I feel that way on lives too, especially when we had so many people in this live. There's a lot. But join me again on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and if you really want to make sure your question gets asked, make sure to subscribe. I will dedicate one live to subscribers first. That will be the perk of them. But until Tuesday, we'll be back to see you guys. The name of the book of the one that I just was mentioning is The Gift of Fear. Gift of Fear by Gavin DeBecker. Okay, guys, I'll see you.